Hello, friends. Welcome to this 38th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then Moria series in progress as shown here. Both this and the Secret Teaching webinars are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald's Secret Doctrine or Secret Teachings. We'll start by checking in on HPB's travels as described in old diary leaves. Last month, we read about Colonel Olcott, who during a speaking tour in southern Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, continued to heal the infirm by means of his mesmeric healing techniques. In this reading, this is a really unusual one, Olcott rids a local young monk of the unwanted advances of an out-of-form yakshini or demon lover. Don't read about this every day. So we'll need two readers for this. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Joe, can you please start and then Michael?
A case of the demon lover type was brought me at Gala by the chief priest of a Buddhist vihara, a young monk of perhaps 27 years of age, had been haunted since 2 or 3 years by a yakshini, or a female demon who, the old monk told me, had been playing the part of a spirit wife to him, but to such excess as to rather suggest a person afflicted by nymphomania. The poor fellow was thus obsessed 7 or 8 times a day and had become reduced to almost a skeleton. The superior calmly asked me to work a cure. Fortunately, I had successfully treated a similar case in America some years before, the patient being a lady, so that I knew pretty well what to do. I put the monk on a course of mesmerized water, making him come to me every morning for a month, for the day's supply, after which time he was completely cured. I then sent for the chief priest and advised him to disrobe his young friend and send him out to take up the ordinary life of the householder, which was done.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, second reader, please.
The simple explanation is that the influence of the bad elemental spirit upon its medium was nullified and destroyed by the power of my stronger human will, supplemented by the constant action of the vitalized water. Among the scientific practitioners of mesmerism, there have never been two opinions, so far as I know, as to the efficacy of magnetized water as a therapeutic agent. Deleuze says, it is one of the most powerful and salutary agents that can be employed. I have seen magnetized water produce effects so marvelous that I was afraid of having deceived myself, and could not be convinced until I had made 1,000 experiments. Magnetizers in general have not made sufficient use of it. How long the water retains the aura has not, he says, been clearly determined, but it certainly retains it for many days, and numerous facts seem to prove it not to have been lost after many weeks.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, I'm sure we could talk about this for a while, but we're going to have to move on. During our last session, we finished our analysis of verse 6 of stanza 4, which describes the creation of the Lapika, or lords of karma. Before we move on to stanza 5, let's take a look at the final entry in Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, which specifically references this 6th verse. So could we get a reader, please, and somebody intrepid?
Yeah, I always rely on my great intrepid friend Scott, but even though I see some of these words, I am going to try this for you, Francis, okay?
Oh, go
So
for it.
please excuse me for murdering some of these. Then the second seven, who are the Lapika, produced the three, word, voice, and spirit. The rejected son is
I
one.
have to interrupt you. It's produced by the three, and I wouldn't change
Oh.
it except for the meaning is opposite. So
Sorry.
yeah.
The rejected son is one. The sons are countless. What is the relation of the Lapika, the second seven, to the primordial seven, and to the first sacred four? Answer: if you believe that any save the highest initiates can explain this to your satisfaction, then you are greatly mistaken. The relation can be better understood, or rather shown to be above all understanding, by first studying the Gnostic system of the early centuries of Christianity, from that of Simon Magus down to the highest and noblest of them, the so-called Pistis Sophia. All of these systems are derived from the East. That which we call the primordial seven and the second seven are called by Simon Magus the eons, the primeval, the second and the third series of syzygies. They are the graduated emanations, ever descending lower and lower into matter, from that primordial principle which he calls fire, and we svabhavat. Behind that fire, the manifested but silent deity stands with him as it does with us, that which is, was, and ever will be. Let us compare his system with ours. In a passage quoted from his works by the author of Philosophumena, we read, "From this permanent stability and immortality of this first manifested principle, fire, the third logos, which immutability does not preclude activity, as the second, from it is endowed with intelligence and reason, Ma'at. It, the fire, passed from the potentiality of action to action itself. From this series of evolutions were formed six beings, or the emanation from the infinite potency. They were formed in syzygies, i.e., they radiated out of the flame two by two, one being active, the other the passive principle. These Simon named nous and
Epinoia.
epinoia, okay, or spirit and thought. Is it nous or is it just nous?
Nous. Yes, it is nous.
Nous and epinoia, or spirit and thought. Phony and onoma, voice and name. Logismos and enthymesis.
Enthymesis. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Reasoning and reflection. Those I can do. And again, in each of these six primitive beings, the infinite potency was in its totality, but it was there in potentiality and not in act. It had to be established therein through an image, that of the paradigm, in order that it should appear in all its essence, virtue, grandeur, and effects. For only then could it become like unto the parent potency, infinite and eternal. If, on the contrary, it was not conformed by or through the image, that potentiality could never become potency or pass into action, but was lost for lack of use, as it happens to a man who, having an aptitude for grammar or geometry, does not exercise it. It gets lost for him, just as if he never had it.
Okay, thanks, BL. You did great with those words, actually. So any thoughts or questions? A lot in this. Clearly, HPB endorses the Gnostic doctrine. Those of you who have been following the Secret Teachings of All Ages series will recognize HPB's reference to syzygies. Let's take a closer look. In the Gnostic system, the quote, primordial seven and the second seven break out as a series of syzygies, or pairs of opposites, which are the expression of fire, the theosophical svabhavat, described in this diagram as the universal principle. HPB then names these syzygies, which are illustrated in this chart. Notably, each pair has a masculine and a feminine expression, the latter deriving from the former, i.e. thought comes from mind, name from voice, and reflection from reason. We covered this in some detail way back in Secret Teachings webinar number 11. Perhaps the most challenging statement in this quote, again from Hippolytes Philosophomena, is in each of these six primitive beings, the infinite potency was in its totality, but it was there in potentiality and not in act. It had to be established therein through an image, that of the paradigm, in order that it should appear in all its essence, virtue, grandeur, and effects. For only then could it become like unto the parent potency, infinite and eternal. So for me, the puzzler here is what is meant by a quote, image of the paradigm. Possibly the paradigm is the whole 7-in-1 system, the interrelated matrix of six syzygies or energies expressing the one fire. For me, establishing an image of this paradigm suggests, there's no way that we're going to actually know what's being inferred here, because we're talking about, even in our solar system, we're talking about the seven planetary logi, right, who are one in the sun. And if you look at it on cosmic levels, it would be the seven spirits before the throne, right, or the six and their synthesizing seventh, which emanate from the one. But you can only do what you can do. So for me, establishing an image of this paradigm suggests imagining and thus formulating a plan for the unfoldment of manifestation, thus enabling these syzygies, these quote, six primitive beings, to demonstrate the parent potency. This visioning and establishing of a plan is a particular work of the Lepikas, whose creation is the subject of this verse number 6. So, running with this hypothesis for a moment, each pair of syzygies, through the act of formulating their part of the plan, you could also look at it as activating their part of the plan, which is, imagining the potentiality. Through formulation of their specific, through the act of formulating their part of the plan was thus infused with the potency of the one who sent them forth. Through formulation of their specific activity came awareness of their inherent unity. Of course, the only true thing that can be said about these highest of the high is if you believe that any save the highest initiates can explain this to your satisfaction, then you are greatly mistaken. That was the first comment she made, right? So any thoughts or questions about this? In the short period after writing the Secret Doctrine, excuse me, And before the end of her incarnation, HPB occasionally lectured on the Gnostic doctrine. She seemed to be fascinated by it at the end of her life, which she had often referred to in her books. Shown here are two collections of these Gnostic writings. Okay, let's revisit HPB's summary paragraph on stanza 4, just so we'll get some idea of where we've come from over these last many months of analyzing this stanza 4. And then we'll move on to stanza 5. Can we get a reader for the stanza 4 part of this, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Stanza 4 shows the differentiation of the germ of the universe into the septenary hierarchy of conscious divine powers, who are the active manifestations of the one supreme energy. They are the framers, shapers, and ultimately the creators of all the manifested universe, in the only sense in which the name creator is intelligible. They inform and guide it. They are the intelligent beings who adjust and control evolution, embodying in themselves those manifestations of the one law, which we know as the laws of nature. Generically, they are known as the Dhyan Choans, though each of the various groups has its own designation in the Secret Doctrine. This stage of evolution is spoken of in Hindu mythology as the creation of the gods. In stanza 5, the process of world formation is described. First, diffused cosmic matter, then the fiery whirlwind, the first stage in the formation of a nebula. That nebula condenses, and after passing through various transformations, forms a solar universe, a planetary chain, or a single planet, as the case may be.
Thanks, Carrie. So we've got the first stanza 4 was the 6 syzygies, or the 7 Prajapatis, the septenary hierarchy emanating from the one. The entire stanza was dealt with that. She gives a interesting further articulation of this term creator, the only sense in which the name creator is intelligible, which is they inform and guide it, and they are the intelligent beings who adjust and control evolution. So as opposed to creating it out of nothing, right? It's a difference in interpretation of this term creator. Okay, so that's where we've been, and this is where we're going. I think it would serve us well to get a feel for the scope of this stanza 5, in which Fohat plays a key role. Let's go ahead and read through these 6 verses. Can we get a reader for this?
Scott, can you do that for us, please? You're self-muted.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Stanza 5. 1. The primordial 7, the first 7 breaths of the dragon of wisdom, produce in their turn from their holy circumgyrations breaths, the fiery whirlwind. 2. They make of him the messenger of their will. The Zu becomes Fohat, the swift son of the divine sons, whose sons are the Lapika, runs circular errands. Fohat is the steed, and the thought is the rider. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds, takes 3 and 5 and 7 strides through the 7 regions above and the 7 below. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks and joins them. 3. He is their guiding spirit and leader. When he commences work, he separates the sparks of the lower kingdom that float and thrill with joy in their radiant dwellings, and forms therewith the germs of wheels. He places them in the 6 directions of space, and one in the middle, the central wheel. 4. Fohat traces spiral lines to unite the 6th to the 7th, the crown. An army of the sons of light stands at each angle, and the Lapika in the middle wheel, they say. This is good. The first divine world is ready. The first is now the second. Then the divine Arupa reflects itself in the Chaya Loka, the first garment of the Anapudanka. 5. Fohat takes 5 strides and builds a winged wheel at each corner of the square for the 4 holy ones and their armies. 6. The Lapika circumscribed the triangle. The first one, the cube, the second one, and the pentacle within the egg. It is the ring called Pass Not for those who descend and ascend. Also for those who during the Kalpa are progressing towards the great day, be with us. Thus, when formed, the Arupa and the Arupa, thus were formed, the Rupa and Arupa. From one light, 7 lights. From each of the 7, 7 times 7 lights. The wheels watch the ring.
Thank you, Scott.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, indeed. So a lot going on here with Fohat and the Lapikas. And it's basically the process of moving from the 7 primordial ones to the whole realm of manifestation. It's sort of summed up here. Thus were formed the Rupa and Arupa, Rupa being that with form and that without form, right? From one light, 7, from each of the 7, 7 times 7, meaning the 343. But, we're not going to, we're going to be taking this over a period of months, So let's take a look at HPB's commentary on verse 1, which reads, verse 1 that is, the primordial 7, the first 7 breaths of the dragon of wisdom produce in their turn from their holy circumgyrating breaths the fiery whirlwind. The first paragraph of HPB's commentary actually introduces the entire stanza, not so much the first verse. So if we could get a reader for this first paragraph, please. Just starting at the A section.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? There you go. Thanks.
Okay, A. This is perhaps the most difficult of all the stanzas to explain. Its language is comprehensible only to him who is thoroughly versed in Eastern allegory and its purposely obscure phraseology. The question will surely be asked, do the occultists believe in all these builders, Lapika and Sons of Light, as entities, or are they merely imageries? Imageries, okay.
Yeah, Julie's just
To this, the answer is given as plainly. After due allowance for the imagery of personified powers, we must admit the existence of these entities. If we would not reject the existence of spiritual humanity within physical mankind, for the hosts of these sons of light and the mind-born sons of the first manifested ray of the unknown all are the very root of spiritual man. Unless we want to believe the unphilosophical dogma of a specially created soul for every human birth, a fresh supply of these pouring in daily since Adam, we have to admit the occult teachings. This will be explained in its place. Let us see now what may be the occult meaning of this stanza.
Okay, so in an introduction to the entire stanza with that, any thoughts or questions? The phrase, after due allowance for the imagery of personified powers, reminds us that all humanity's depictions of the gods, whether Hindu, Egyptian, Greek, Christian, spring from the minds of men and women and are at their best symbolic of that which they represent, after allowance for the due imagery, right? Often she teaches a lot just in a passing phrase like this. Next, HPB defends what might be called the fundamental tenet of microcosmic theosophy, quote, the existence of spiritual humanity within physical mankind, by stating, for the hosts of these sons of light and mind-born sons of the first manifested ray of the unknown all, are the very root of spiritual man. Since HPB has chosen to return to basics, let's take a look at two descriptions / definitions of soul. The first from Initiation Human and Solar, and the second from the Theosophical Glossary. Could we get a reader, please?
Lynn, can you read those for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes.
There you go.
We look upon as the one form of existence manifesting in what is called matter, or what incorrectly separating them, we name spirit, soul, and matter in man. Matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of soul on this plane of existence. Soul is the vehicle for the manifestation of spirit. And these three, as a trinity, are synthesized by life, which pervades them all. Soul, generally the manifesting vehicle or garment in which an ego clothes itself. First in serial order is the monad, on whatever plane and of whatever class. Its vehicle or carrier is its efflux, the ego, which in its turn clothes itself in its own vital garment, which is soul. Cosmically, therefore, soul is the vehicle or upadi of spirit. As the monad creates for its manifestation successive vehicles, soul in its widest sense includes all these, even the physical body, but is usually used in an aggregative sense to designate the intermediate nature, excluding the monad on the one hand and the physical body on the other. Such divisions produces the triad of spirit, soul, body, where the soul is the vehicle of spirit and body is the vehicle of soul and spirit. The soul is evolved by experiences on different planes. In itself, it is merely a vehicle, but informed by the monad through the latter's ego. It is a living conscious entity. The broad meaning is particularized with qualifying adjectives and such as animal soul, human soul, etc., saying that every living thing, animal, vegetable, or mineral, has a soul, refers to the intermediate nature of the being, of which its physical body is the vehicle. Souls, like bodies, are aggregates of innumerable subordinate lives or life atoms of various orders, equivalent to the Greek psyche and the Hebrew nephesh.
Thanks, Lynn. Any thoughts or questions about this? These two quotes? That last sentence of the upper quote, matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of soul on this plane of existence. Soul is the vehicle for the manifestation of spirit, and these three as a trinity are synthesized by life, which pervades them all. That's an oft-quoted DK teaching. But what's important here is that technically soul or ego means egg, which is like a container. And it can, he says it can even represent the physical body because that contains is that which it expresses. So, the idea of soul as being the outer expression of spirit, and the body being the outer expression of soul. They're all at some level a soul form relationship in that is infused by spirit. Anyway, reference to the ray of the unknown all takes us all the way back to stanza 3, verse 3. Darkness radiates light, and light drops one solitary ray into the mother deep. The ray shoots through the virgin egg. The ray causes the eternal egg to thrill and drop the non-eternal germ, which condenses into the world egg. To refresh our memories as to the nature of the unknown all, let's take a look at this passage from earlier in the Secret Doctrine. Can we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Are you there?
Hello,
There you
can you
go.
hear
There
me?
you go. Yes, thank you.
I'm on the phone. I'll do the best I can.
You're fine.
To render these ideas clearer to the general reader, let him set out with the postulate that there is one absolute reality which all manifested conditions being. This infinite and eternal cause is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. It is, of course, devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to the manifested finite being. It is beingness rather than being in Sanskrit, and is beyond all thought or speculation.
Thank you. In Sanskrit, sat, S-A-T. So yeah, this distinction between beingness and being as beingness, of course, language is completely at a loss here because, the concepts weren't formed around to express these ideas, the idea of being and being, be is very much manifestation oriented. But anyway, this is what we've done with it. Beingness, meaning spirit existence. No, see, you can't do it. The essence of the life aspect, right? Okay, anyway, never hurts to go back.
Okay.
Any thoughts or questions about this?
Yes, Anne's got her hand up. Go ahead, Anne Veronica. You're self-muted. There you go.
Okay, you said before that ego means an egg. Didn't you say that?
Yeah, I did.
Yes, I wanted to give you some information from Greek. Ego, ego, and that's how we translate it. Means I am. It's from the verb I am. That's what means for us in Greek. So it's a small information.
Yes, I didn't quite understand though. Means what?
Ego in Greek means I am. It's from the verb I am. It means I am. I am in being.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's very useful. Yeah, it's interesting how I am is a declaration of two principles at the same time, right? Existence and I-ness or beingness, right? So, which is well described by the ego, right? Thank you.
Francis, and
Yeah.
of course, I always think of the Leo mantra then when you're talking about that, which is helping to develop both the little and the larger cased ego. I am that, and that am I.
Right. And exactly. I actually prefer the I am that I am, which is another way of saying it. He uses that also. and it shows the two I ams in kind of relationship, which, you know, I am being a statement of personality, and then I am that identification with soul. And then it circles back and comes to the higher understanding at the same time. The final I am being monadic, or so I am that I am. Yeah. Thank you, Biel, for that.
And Yvonne added that ego, lowercase, as personality.
Indeed. So, you know, just as was stated in this area, even the personality or physical body can be a form of ego, right? It's a vehicle. Okay, so moving on. Up next, can we get a reader starting here, please?
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Sounds like she stepped
Yes,
away.
sorry for my delay. The,
No problem.
the doctrine teaches that in order to become a divine, fully conscious God, even the highest, the spiritual primeval intelligences must pass through the human stage. And when we say human, this does not apply merely to our terrestrial humanity, but to the mortals that inhabit any world, that is, to those intelligences that have reached the appropriate equilibrium between matter and spirit, as we have now, since the middle point of the fourth root race of the fourth round has passed. Each entity must have won for itself the right of becoming divine through self-experience. Hegel, the great German thinker, must have known or sensed intuitionally this truth when saying, as he did, that the unconscious evolved the universe only in the hope of attaining clear self-consciousness, of becoming, in other words, man. For this is also the secret meaning of the usual Puranic phrase that Brahma being constantly moved by the desire to create. This explains also the hidden Kabbalistic meaning of the saying, the breath becomes a stone, the stone a plant, the plant an animal, the animal a man, the man a spirit, and the spirit a god. The mind-born sons, the rishis, the builders, etc., were all men, of whatever forms and shapes, in other worlds and the preceding manvantaras.
Thank you, Joe. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Okay, the main premise is that all higher beings, even the gods, must first pass through the human stage, and that humanity as a terrestrial kingdom in nature is representative of a universal stage of becoming. In other words, there are humanities throughout all of creation, or equivalent stages of becoming. Interestingly, HPV then seems to define humanity as, quote, that stage of equilibrium between matter and spirit, which occurred on our planet in the fourth root race of the fourth round. It can be no coincidence that this is the precise midway point of the entire Earth scheme, as you can see here. This spirit matter equilibrium is won, we're here told, through self-experience, which bestows the, quote, right to become divine, a variation on Hegel's idea that, quote, the unconscious evolved the universe only in hope of attaining clear self-consciousness. In my mind, Hegel's statement is clever and provocative, but suggesting that the unmoved mover, quote, hopes to attain is to imagine that the first logos is limited by human aspirational hope. Perhaps Krishna said it best, having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. Since standing causal to the sweep of time, beingness, which by making the statement Krishna proves he has attained, holds all potential and self-realized stages within itself. Finally, we have the breath becomes a stone, the stone a plant, the plant an animal, the animal a man, the man a spirit, and the spirit a God. With the breath becomes a stone, we have a summation of the entire involutional arc, followed by an iteration of each kingdom from first to sixth. First stone being the seventh, the plant being the sixth, etc., right up to, or I should say it the other way. The first stone being the first kingdom, plant being the second, animal being the third, etc. HPB finishes the paragraph by reiterating the concept presented in the first sentence that, quote, the mind-born sons, the rishis, the builders, etc., were all men. All came from humankind. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Yeah, see your hand.
Yes, Yvonne has her hand up. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Well, I just wanted to ask what you thought about the mind-born sons were all men of whatever forms and shapes in other worlds and preceding Manvantaras. Do
Yeah.
we have any knowledge of what forms these other humans, where all these other men were? They probably didn't look like us, right?
Well, certainly not. Even in our Earth, root races. Even in this series of root races, there would be a tremendous difference. And then when you take in the possibility of other humanities, even in our solar system, good Lord knows what the form aspect, manifested as, since that form is going to adapt to, the terrestrial environment in such a way that it can best make use of it, right? Such as hands and feet, etc. Now, my guess is that the senses are more universal, even though they probably unfold sequentially. We're told that hearing comes first, even in one incarnation, and that then we have sight, etc. But the means by which these senses are brought into the consciousness could change based on the physical attributes of whatever humanity. It's it's a really provocative idea here, that and for me the most amazing thing in this paragraph is the idea that humanity here, let me go back to where she actually says this. Yeah, that humanity is literally, she seems to literally define humanity as those intelligences that have reached the appropriate equilibrium between matter and spirit, that somehow in that stage of becoming, this fourth kingdom comes into expression, right? It makes sense because we were talking about this earlier in a local class I teach, that humanity can be seen as the third animal kingdom, entrained by, or the fifth kingdom of souls. That is to say, the kingdom of souls acquiesce to taking on these animal level consciousness. And in that coming together, the human kingdom is born. But it's this this particular quality that she describes, this equilibrium between spirit and matter as being a definition of humanity, I think quite interesting. And, you know, that came together right here. This represents the Aquarian type, right? And there was a whole group of animals that came in. The last group of animals to come in was in the Atlantean root race. Even though, you know, we normally think of them as coming in that great wave that came in, you know, during Lemuria. Well, that was a long-winded answer to your question, but there you have
Well,
it.
thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Anything else? Any other questions?
Yes.
About
Yes, Diana says, I read that Mercurians are translucent bodies.
Well, since they're, you know, non-physical, you would think that that would automatically make them translucent. But I would, you know, they're going to be impermeable types, you know, because they're so close to the sun that, you know, they could exist etherically, but they, you know, they would have their own way of dealing with their proximity to the sun. It's really an astonishing humanity to imagine. Yeah. Also, I'd like to know where you heard that, because you know, I'd like to be on that, in that newsletter. You know, hopefully straight from Mercury, right?
Diana, you're self-muted if you want to unmute and answer Francis's question.
That's all right. You don't have to answer that. That's okay.
No, I don't know.
No,
I
that's
am
fine.
very interested about the translucent bodies. So
Right.
this is why I pay my attention about this Mercurian possibilities. That's all.
Yeah. It's a fascinating topic. You know, what other humanities, you know, what their appearance, what their orientation, you know, where they are in their root races. All this is, it's a, you know, a deep and fascinating topic. And it's much talked about by both HPB and DK. Okay. Next up, could we get a reader for this short paragraph?
Sure. Diana, can you read that for us? You're self-muted now, so you should be able
Starting
to.
with A. Starting with the A.
This is the late. Okay.
I'm sorry?
Okay, A. This subject, being so very mystical, is therefore the most difficult to explain in all its details and bearings, since the whole mystery of evolutionary creation is contained in it. A sentence or two in it vividly recalls to mind similar ones in the Kabbalah, and the phraseology of the king psalmist, as both, when speaking of God, show him making the wind his messenger and his ministers a flaming fire. But in the esoteric doctrine, it is used figuratively. The fire wind is the incandescent cosmic dust, which only follows magnetically, as the iron filings follow the magnet, the directing thought of the creative forces. Yet this cosmic dust, something more, for every atom in the universe has the potentiality of self-consciousness in it, and is, like the monads of Leibniz, a universe in itself, and for itself it is an atom and an angel.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions? The subject here referenced is the idea that all creation, wait a minute. Yeah, this term that's highlighted here, this subject, here references the idea that all creation passes through the human kingdom. The it, in quote, a sentence or two in it, refers to the doctrine from the previous paragraph, which we're here told is, quote, similar to ones in the Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah, and the phraseology of the king psalmist. The king psalmist is King David of Israel, who wrote about half of the psalms that appear in the Old Testament, though he is often credited with more than that. HPB doesn't identify this esoteric doctrine. Possibly it's the commentary that she etherically accessed while writing the Secret Doctrine. But she does point out similar passages between this doctrine and the Kabbalah, to wit, God making the wind his messenger and his ministers of flaming fire. The idea of fiery ministers is well described in this entry on seraphim. Can we get a reader, please?
I'll read it. Seraphim, Hebrew, from the verbal root seraph, to burn, plus of seraph, fiery, burning, venomous, poisonous. The word came to have the significance of serpents, referring to those beings described in Isaiah 6:2 as possessing 6 wings, guarding the divine throne, and endowed with a voice with which they praise the deity. They are the symbols of Jehovah and of all the other demiurgi who produce out
guy. Yeah, go
okay
ahead.
them who produce out of themselves 6 sons or likenesses, 7 with their creator.
Okay, so, we get back again to these syzygies, these pairs. That's where the 6 and the 6 wings are going to be opposing wings, right? One on each side. That's going to be the masculine, feminine that we looked at, right? Which guard the, quote, divine throne, which would be the sacred synthesizing one, right? And endowed with a voice with which they praise the deity. The sound, which is the creative sound by which the 6 create manifested universe, right?
Francis?
Yeah.
Carrie has given us the psalm. The Lord wraps himself in light as with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent. 3, and lays the beams of his upper chambers on their waters. He makes the clouds his chariot and rides on the wings of the wind. 4, he makes winds his messenger, flames of fire his servants. So that sounds like it's verses
Yeah,
2,
it's
3, and
directly
4.
related.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Right. So, whenever you see wind, air, you're looking at universal mind. And of course, which is going to be the fiery chariot by which, the phohatic or electrical fiery chariot that bridges, we're going to be getting more into this as we go through this, that bridges spirit, or that Godhead that's described here, and the form aspect. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, HPB addresses the phrase making the wind his messenger in her next sentence. The fiery wind is the incandescent cosmic dust, which only follows magnetically as the iron filings follow the magnet, the directing thought of the creative forces. So it's interesting. So it's these so the directing thought is, forms as is energized or is able to express itself through magnetism. So it's a kind of rare insight into the magnetic method by which the creative forces, the 7 fiery ministers, or 6, direct numinal substance, that is homogeneous substance, called here the fiery wind, the oi ha hu of verse 4 of the previous stanza. Finally, we have, yet this cosmic dust is something more, for every atom in the universe has the potentiality of self-consciousness in it, and is, like the monads of Leibniz, a universe in itself and for itself. It is an atom and an angel. So the fiery wind, which is the cosmic dust, contains the myriads of potentially self-conscious atoms that comprise the universe, including the potential and eventual humanities of every solar system. So way back when we ran across this concept, the idea of pralaya holding this fiery dust in situ until the next manifestation came forth, and then they were reanimated. So you have kind of 2 forms of it. At the cosmic and final pralaya, between multiverses, everything is returned to absolute homogeneity, which is, being described here. But in a systemic pralaya, the level of consciousness that has been achieved by each atom of consciousness is held in situ and then is reanimated at that level. They don't start over from scratch. Otherwise, there would be no possibility of becoming, right? Of moving higher and higher. You would always be starting over. But evidently, or so the teaching goes, at the final great pralaya, it's a complete return to homogeneity, right? So there's some great mysteries there. Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, on to the final short paragraph of commentary on verse 1, relatively short commentary, but she makes up for it in verse 2. Could we get a reader, please?
Martha S., can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Still self-muted.
Oh, there it is.
There you go. There you go.
I'm so used to being on Zoom, you know. Okay,
Starting
where
with,
do I start?
within this connection.
In this connection, it should be noted that one of the luminaries of the modern evolutionist school, Mr. A.R. Wallace, when discussing the inadequacy of natural selection as the sole factor in the development of physical man, practically concedes the whole point here discussed. He holds that the evolution of man was directed and furthered by superior intelligences, whose agency is a necessary factor in the scheme of nature. But once the operation of these intelligences is admitted in one place, it is only a logical deduction to extend it still further. No hard and fast line can be drawn.
Thanks, Martha. Any thoughts or questions? The evolutionist school here described is not the Darwinian school of evolution that promotes the theory of natural selection, though the latter grew out of the former. In fact, the evolutionist school has become so obscure that the only place I could find a reference to it was in a Soviet era encyclopedia from 1979. Could we get a reader for this entrance? It'll be the only time probably you'll ever read an entrance from a Soviet encyclopedia.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Putin and the Russian hacking, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hopefully this is a little better than that.
Evolutionist school emerged during the formative period of ethnology as a science, second half of the 19th century. The evolutionists considered the universal law of social development to be the evolution of culture from lower to higher forms, from savagery to civilization. They viewed history as the sum of the independent evolutions of separate elements of culture and social structure. Most adherents proceeded not from a materialistic understanding of the general laws of human history, but from the idealist thesis of the psychic unity of the human race. It's from the Great Soviet Encyclopedia.
So the subject of this last sentence, describing the psychic unity of humanity, is what set the evolutionist school apart from the Darwinists. A.R. Wallace jointly published the fiery paper, the first paper on natural selection with Charles Darwin. Let me say that again. This man, A.R. Wallace, jointly published the first paper on natural selection with Charles Darwin, who then went on to write on the origin of the species. But unlike Darwin, Wallace believed in a non-material origin for the higher mental faculties of human beings, a belief that put him at odds with most of the scientific community of his time and still would, right? So it's interesting. I found this really interesting that this, school of evolutionists really split down the middle, and the original school became so obscure that it was hard to even find a reference to it. But in fact, Darwin was part of that before he split off and became you could say, a complete materialist in his understanding. Okay, any final thoughts or questions?
Yeah, Scott's got his hand up, so I'll do you first, Scott, and then Robert.
I recall reading someplace that, to the contrary, Darwin admitted that his theory of natural selection was not sufficient enough to explain evolution. And he may have gotten that from Wallace himself. And I know that they did put out this together, but he admitted that it wasn't everything. And to kind of put him in that corner is not accurate.
It's not accurate. Okay, that's actually good. That's sort of the the general understanding of Darwin, but he was fast friends with Wallace, and so and they actually developed a lot of their understanding together. Wallace is now not known, but so that's good news. Thanks. Yes. Anyone else?
Yes, Robert. Go ahead, Robert.
I think when this phrase evolutionist school, I'm just speculating here, but I don't know that she's referring to the evolutionist school that was in the Soviet encyclopedia, the Russian encyclopedia. I think she's actually just talking to the school of evolution that Darwin was a member of and Wallace was a member of. And there was a lot of tension between Darwin and Wallace. I don't think they were actually friends. Darwin is doing some work. Wallace had written this paper and it was sent to Darwin from somebody they both knew, and Darwin freaked out that somebody was going to publish this, ahead of him. And so they finally were mediated to publish this thing together. And there was a constant tension for the rest of their lives because Darwin was always writing to Wallace saying, I can't believe you're saying this stuff. You're embarrassing the whole theory of evolution when you bring up these kinds of ideas, because Wallace was also a spiritualist, etc. Anyway, that's just a speculation.
Well, that sounds like that you've heard a lot about this. Sounds like they may have started as friends and then had a falling out over their interpretation. And because Wallace continued to champion the idea of unseen forces and which was not expressed in the evolution of the species concept. Thanks for that, Robert.
Sure.
Yeah, it's always useful to get some additional perspective and understanding. Okay, yeah, any final thoughts or questions on HPB's commentary on verse 1? Quite brief, really. Okay, then. Having considered HPB's thoughts, let's take a look at the verse itself. First up, the primordial 7, the first 7 breaths of the dragon of wisdom. So we'll consider this phrase. The dragon of wisdom here references Oya-Ohu the younger as a singularity rather than as the sevenfold, right? Who in a further involutional stage breathes forth the primordial 7 as described in verse 7 of stanza 3, which we've referenced many, many times now. Can we get a reader for this?
Yes, Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Behold, O Lanu, the radiant child of the two, the unparalleled refulgent glory, bright space, son of dark space, which emerges from the depths of the great dark waters. It is Oeahu the younger, the ... He shines forth as the sun. He is the blazing divine dragon of wisdom. The one is 4, and 4 takes to itself 3, and the union produces the Sapta, in whom are the 7, which become the Tridasa, or the hosts and the multitudes.
Thanks, Carrie. You may remember that breath, demonstrating as light, Bhaskara, and heat, one of the 3 factors of motion, is the means by which the third logos issues forth his own septenary nature, thereby becoming the 1 in 7. This was the subject of HPB's exploration of the syzygies in response to a student's question in Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge that we looked at the beginning of the webinar. So next, produce in their turn from their holy circumgyrating breaths the fiery whirlwind. The idea of these circumgyrating breaths was introduced in stanza 4, verse 4, as the Oi-Ha-Hu, the quote, permutations of Oya-Ohu. The footnote is worth rereading. Could we get a reader for this? Just the very bottom part.
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
The literal signification of the word is, among the Eastern occultists of the North, a circular wind, whirlwind. But in this instance, it is a term to denote the ceaseless and eternal cosmic motion, or rather the force that moves it, which force is tacitly accepted as the deity, but never named. It is the eternal Karana, the ever-acting cause.
Thanks, Michael. So breath is here used as motion, demonstrating as heat and light in 3 progressive stages. The 1 becoming 7, who initiate further diversity through their, quote, holy circumgyrating breaths, which in turn produces, presumably, a unified fiery whirlwind. Interesting that the primordial 7 and the first 7 breaths are described as synonymous, verifying the idea as expressed in the footnote we just read that the force or breath is, quote, the deity itself. Finally, the fiery whirlwind is described in the commentary as cosmic fiery dust, which contains all potential atoms of self-consciousness. The result of the fiery whirlwind is described at the end of the verse we just read from stanza 3 as the Tridasha, or the hosts and multitudes. So, the dragon of wisdom initiates through motion, heat, and light the first 7 breaths, which are the primordial 7. The Hindu Prajapatis, the Gnostic Syzygies, the Christian and Jewish seraphim, who become the actual agents of creation by means of their, quote, holy circumgyrating breaths. Their product, called here the fiery whirlwind, manifests as cosmic dust, which differentiates into all creation, Krishna's fragments of the whole. All this is done in accordance with the plan formulated by the Lipika, who are the second 7. It's amazing what can be packed into one short verse. Any final thoughts or questions on this first verse? Okay, then. Let's take a look at verse 2. Actually, it's long enough that we could get a reader for this. It's one of the main verses of this stanza. We'll be on it for a while, certainly for the rest of this session.
Lynn, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
They make of him the messenger of their will. The Dzyan becomes Fohat, the swift son of the divine sons, whose sons are the Lipika, run circular errands. Fohat is the steed, and the thought is the rider. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds, takes 3 and 5 and 7 strides through the 7 regions above and the 7 below. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks and joins them.
Thank you, Lynn. So let's take a look at the first paragraph of HPB's commentary, which references the A section, quote, they make of him the messenger of their will. And of course, the they being the 7, right, that were described in verse 1, who are also the 1. So let's see. Yeah, could we get a reader, please? Starting at the A section.
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
I'm just pausing because it's so deep, and this is wonderful. This shows the primordial 7 using for their vahan, vehicle, or the manifested subject, which becomes the symbol of the power directing it, Fohat, called in consequence the messenger of their will, the fiery whirlwind. Dzyan becomes Fohat. The expression itself shows it. Dzyan is the one real magical knowledge or occult wisdom, which, dealing with eternal truths and primal causes, becomes almost omnipotence when applied in the right direction. Its antithesis is Dzyan, that which deals with illusions and false appearances only, as in our exoteric modern sciences. In this case, Dzyan is the expression of the collective wisdom of the Dhyana Buddhas.
Thank you, Joe. Any thoughts or questions? Here, HPB identifies Fohat as both the fiery whirlwind and the messenger of the will of the primordial 7. And perhaps most importantly, that Fohat is in this capacity the Vahan, or vehicle for manifestation. Actually, HPB introduced this idea way back on page 16 of the Proem. Let's take a look. Can we get a reader, please?
Scott, are you available to read? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
dude, this is a good one for you.
Sure. Just as pre-cosmic ideation is the root of all individual consciousness, so pre-cosmic substance is the substratum of matter and the various grades of its differentiation. Hence it will be apparent that the contrast of these two aspects of the absolute is essential to the existence of the manifested universe. Apart from cosmic substance, cosmic ideation could not manifest as individual consciousness, since it is only through a vehicle, upadi or vahan, of matter that consciousness wells up as I am I, a physical basis being necessary to focus the ray of the universal mind at a certain stage of complexity. Again, apart from cosmic ideation, cosmic substance would remain an empty abstraction, and no emergence of consciousness would ensue. The manifested universe, therefore, is pervaded by duality, which is, as it were, the very essence of this existence as manifestation. But just as the opposite poles of subject and object, spirit and matter, are but aspects of the one unity in which they are synthesized, so in the manifested universe, there is that which links spirit to matter, subject to object. This something, at present unknown to Western speculation, is called by the occultists Fohat. It is the bridge by which the ideas existing in the divine thought are impressed on cosmic substance as the laws of nature. Fohat is thus the dynamic energy of cosmic ideation. Or regarded from the other side, it is the intelligent medium, the guiding power of all manifestation, the thought divine, transmitted and made manifest to the Dhyan Chohans, the architects of the visible world. Thus, from spirit, or cosmic ideation, comes our consciousness. From cosmic substance, the several vehicles in which that consciousness is individualized and attains to self, or reflective, consciousness. While Fohat and its various manifestations is the mysterious link between mind and matter, the animating principle electrifying every atom into life.
Yeah, this is way back in the very beginning of this volume of the Secret Doctrine. And the illustration is from an obscure book by J.D. Buck called Symbolism or Mystic Masonry. So any thoughts or questions? So whereas this paragraph focuses on Fohat as, quote, the bridge by which the ideas existing in the divine thought are impressed on cosmic substance as the laws of nature, verse 2 describes the same phenomenon as a fiery whirlwind, which is a messenger of the will of the primordial seven. When we interpolate the two descriptions, we might hypothesize that divine thought, which is the will of the seven, is impressed on cosmic substance by Fohat as Oi Aha Hu, the fiery whirlwind, thereby animating and electrifying every atom into life. HPB then introduces the term Dzyan. You know, I just noticed the first time, it's a sort of a duh factor, but these are all the stanzas of Dzyan, right? And this Dzyan has the, you know, the same exact prefix. So you have Dzyan and Dzyan. And, you know, it may be Ziu, Zion, Zu, who knows? But I'll pronounce it Dzyan and Zion or Zan. Okay, anyway, so she introduces the term Dzyan, which he describes as the, quote, one real magical knowledge or occult wisdom, an active form of divine thought. In the phrase Dzyan becomes Fohat, we have a terse description of an ineffable process whereby divine ideation becomes intelligent electricity through magical knowledge. Then at the end of the paragraph, this definition, Dzyan, is the expression of the collective wisdom of the Dhyani Buddhas. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. Sorry. Dzyan is the expression of the collective wisdom of the Dhyani Buddhas. It seems to shift the perspective from Dzyan as an active form of cosmic ideation to that same force as known and wielded by Dhyani Buddhas of the Dhyani Buddhas of our Earth scheme. This high wisdom has its shadowy counterpart in the form-based Dzyan Mi. There is no further reference to Dzyan in either volume of the Secret Doctrine. In fact, I looked back through all the collected works. This is it. This is the only paragraph where the term Dzyan appears. So it's, it's worth lingering on for a moment. It's being the collective wisdom or occult knowledge. Okay. But in HPB's The Secret Doctrine Dialogues, a record of some of her dialogue with students, she's asked about this second verse, called a shloka in Sanskrit of stanza 5. In her response, we get a taste of her wit as well as of her breadth of knowledge. Could we get a reader for this dialogue?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Mr. A. Kitely, Sloka 2. They make of him the messenger of their will. The Dzyan becomes Fohad, the swift son of the divine sons, whose sons are the Lapika, run circular errands. Question 8. Does this mean that the Lapika are the sons of Fohad, or are they the sons of the primordial 7? Madam Blavatsky. This means that they are the sons of Fohad as a personification of Mahat, the Manasaputras, or sons of the universal intelligences. And it means that the Lapika are the sons of the primordial 7. Whether the Lapika's marriage certificate is legal will be next asked, I suppose. I would not wonder because, for instance, what can I answer you to this? They are the sons. They cannot be the sons. It is simply an expression used. The sons of Fohat mean just as the sons of Lapika. It is simply one coming down from above to below, and that is all.
Francis, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to cough, so I turned my mic on. Well, you just missed it. Absolutely amazing explanation. No, totally kidding. So, yeah, this idea of sons, right, being just a descent into matter, right? The specific expression of that from which they descend. Yeah, I love it. You develop a taste for HPB's wry humor, when you read her for a while, right? Anyway, next up, could we get a reader for the B section? Of this, so starting at the B and including the footnote where you run across it, if you would, please.
Please,
yeah, actually, you don't have to read the first footnote. So let's see, is the second footnote in this section? Yeah, it is. So you could read the second footnote when you come to it. That's this one down here, but don't worry about this esoteric Buddhism reference. So, reader, please.
As the reader is supposed not to be acquainted with the Dhyani Buddhas, it is as well to say at once that according to the Orientalists, there are 5 Dhyanis who are the celestial Buddhas, of whom the human Buddhas are the manifestations in the world of form and matter. Esoterically, however, the Dhyani Buddhas are 7, of whom 5 only have hitherto manifested, and 2 are to come in the 6th and 7th root races. They are, so to speak, the eternal prototypes of the Buddhas who appear on this earth, each of whom has his particular divine prototype. So, for instance, Amitabha is the Dhyani Buddha of Gautama Shakyamuni, manifesting through him whenever this great soul incarnates on earth, as he did in the Tsongkhapa. Footnote, the first and greatest reformer who founded the Yellow Caps, the Lugpas. He was born in the year 1355 AD in Amdo and was the avatar of Amitabha, the celestial name of Gautama Buddha. As the synthesis of the 7 Dhyani Buddhas, Avalokitesvara was the first Buddha, the Logos, so Amitabha is the inner god of Gautama, who in China is called Amita Buddha.
Thanks, Kerry. So it's a bit confusing. In this paragraph, HPV has turned her commentary from Fohat and Zayu to a closer look at those capable of wielding the latter divine occult power, the Dhyani Buddhas. Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary entry on the Dhyani Buddhas. This is going to serve us well because she gets into some detail on this. Can we get a reader for this rather long quote? Actually, if you want, let's divide it into, oops, can't do that. Let's divide it into 2. Just, you could go down to here possibly, and then start the second reader pick up here.
Okay, I'll start with the top, and then Yvonne, when I'm done, if you will please come in. Okay. Dhyani Buddha, from the verbal root di, to meditate, contemplate, and Buddha, awakened one. Buddhas of contemplation or meditation. The 5th in the descending series in the enumeration of the hierarchy of compassion. 2 general hierarchies of spiritual beings brought forth our cosmos. The Dhyani Buddhas are architects who in their aggregate form the higher and more spiritual side, and actually compose the line of luminous arc from the Dhyani Chohans, or the builders or constructors, who form the lower and relatively more material side. The line from this viewpoint only of the shadowy arc. Often the term Dhyani Chohan is used for both these lines of beings. There are 7 Dhyani Buddhas, so that for each round of a septenary planetary chain, there is a presiding Dhyani Buddha or causal Buddha. Our present 4th round is under the care and supervision of the Dhyani Buddha belonging to the 4th degree of this celestial hierarchy. The Dhyani Bodhisattvas, who watch over the globes of the planetary chain in each round, are raised from the Dhyani Buddha of the round. It is this Dhyani Buddha of our 4th round, our Father in heaven, who is the wondrous being, the great initiator, the sacrifice. The ray running through all our individual being, from which we draw our spiritual life and spiritual sustenance, comes direct to us from this hierarchical, wondrous being, in whom we all are rooted. He to us, psychologically and spiritually, holds exactly the same place that the human ego, the man ego, holds to the innumerable multitudes of elemental entities which compose his body. And that's from the Fundamentals of the Esoteric Philosophy. Okay, Yvonne, over to you.
These Dhyani Buddhas furnished humankind with divine kings and leaders who taught humanity the arts and sciences, and who revealed to the incarnated monads that had just shaken off their vehicles of the lower kingdoms, and who had, therefore, lost every recollection of their divine origin, the great spiritual truths of the transcendental worlds. Further, each human monad has sprung from the essence of the Dhyani Buddha. The triads, born under the same parent planet, or rather the radiations of one and the same planetary spirit, Dhyani Buddha, are in all their afterlives and rebirths sister or twin souls on this earth. This was known to every high initiate in every age and in every country. I and my Father are one, said Jesus. When he is made to say elsewhere, I ascend to my Father and your Father, it was simply to show that the group of his disciples and followers attracted to him belonged to the same Dhyani Buddha, star or father, again of the same planetary realm and division as he did.
Thank you both. So any thoughts or questions about this entry? Actually, it was quite a bit longer, but I cut it back a little bit. In her commentary on this verse, HPB, as she often does, shifts from cosmic to planetary unfoldment. The key to how cosmos and our system interrelate is revealed in this phrase. Dhyani Buddha are the fifth in the descending series in the enumeration of the hierarchy of compassion. In a separate entry on the hierarchy of compassion, the Theosophical Glossary further clarifies this statement by giving us the 9 levels, of which the Dhyani Buddhas are the fifth. So let's read through these. Could we get a reader, please?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
The hierarchy of compassion of our solar system is sometimes given as 1. Adi Buddhi, primal wisdom, the mystic universally diffused essence. 2. Mahabuddhi, universal Buddhi, the Logos. 3. Dayaviprakriti, universal divine light, universal life, the second Logos. 4. Sons of light, the 7 cosmic logoi, the logoi of cosmic life, the third Logos. Emanate from the sun and working in its kingdom are the parents of the rectors or planetary spirits of the 7 sacred planets. 5. Dhyani Buddhas, Buddhas of contemplation, also called the celestial Buddhas or causal Buddhas. Through their emanated representatives, each govern one round of the septenary cycles of evolution on a planetary chain. 6. Dhyani Bodhisattvas, Bodhisattvas of contemplation, or Bodhisattvas of the celestial realms. Similarly, through their emanated representatives, each govern one of the 7 globes comprising a planetary chain. 7. Manushya Buddhas, human Buddhas, racial Buddhas. Watch over the root races in a round, 2 appearing in each race, 1 near the commencement and 1 near the midpoint of each root race. Gautama Buddha was the second racial Buddha of the 5th root race. 8. Bodhisattvas are those spiritual and intellectually advanced human beings who leave the nirvana of Buddhahood in order to remain on Earth for their sublime work of aiding, stimulating, and guiding those hosts of entities, including humanity, trailing behind them. 9 men.
Thank you, Michael. It's quite a list, huh? The point of presenting this list is to place the Dhyani Buddhas in context, which will help us better understand this paragraph. Of note here is the idea that Dhyani Buddhas don't themselves incarnate, but send forth and overshadow the, quote, human Buddhas, an idea also alluded to here. HPB then gives us an example of a divine prototype and its emanated representative. Amitabha is the Dhyani Buddha of Gautama Shakyamuni, manifesting through him whenever this great soul incarnates on earth, as he did in Tsongkhapa. As I interpret this, we have 3 levels represented in this statement. Dhyani Buddha, overshadowing a great soul capable of incarnation, and then a further stage representing additional incarnations of that great soul, in this case, Tsongkhapa. High company, these folks. Finally, for this segment of the text, actually, yeah, let's get a reader for this, please.
Okay, Scott, please. Oh, he probably wants me to unmute him. There you go.
Could be.
That works better. Amitabha, the Dhyani Buddha of Gautama, it's often Shakyamuni, SH.
Shakyamuni is right. Yeah, I said Sak, but it is Shakyamuni. You're right.
Manifesting through him whenever this great soul incarnates on earth, as he did in Tsongkhapa. Amitabha, overshadowing Dhyani Buddha, esoterically one of 7, means unmeasured splendor, mystically as boundless light or boundless space, one of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas of Tibetan Buddhism. Gautama Shakyamuni, a great soul capable of incarnation. Gautama is the sacerdotal name of the Sakya family, hence the name of Prince Siddhartha, the son of Sudhodana of Kapilavastu. Gautama Buddha was also called Shakyamuni, meaning the Muni or sage of the Shakyas.
There it is.
Tsongkhapa, additional incarnations of the above great soul. The first and greatest reformer who founded the Yellow Caps, the Gelugpas. He was born in the year 1355 AD in Amdo and was the avatar of Amitabha, the celestial name of Gautama Buddha.
So you get some sense of the interrelation here.
I wonder if the first one that was mentioned, it was said Gautama was the second, previously the second in this 5th root race, was the first then, oh goodness, the name just escaped me. I'll come back to it. Was it?
Yeah, sure. Who the first would have been?
The first one, it's not Siddhartha, it's who was before.
No, it wouldn't be Siddhartha.
No.
Hold that thought. Just jump in when you come on it.
Yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Finally, for this segment of the text, HPB identifies Avalokiteshvara as the 7-in-1 logos, giving us a further stage in our categorization of these Buddhas. So, Scott, you can jump back in and just read the top one. So we just read the 3 below that, right?
Right.
And so this is the one above that.
Right. Avalokiteshvara, the synthesizing logos. Simultaneously with the evolution of the universal mind, the concealed wisdom of Adi Buddha, the one supreme and eternal, manifests itself as Avalokiteshvara, or manifested Ishvara, which is the Osiris of the Egyptians, the Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the heavenly man of the Hermetic philosopher, the Logos of the Platonists, and the Atman of the Vedantins.
Thank you. According to HPB, this places Avalokiteshvara at the level of a son of light, going back to this list, and an emanation of Adi Buddha. Any thoughts or questions? Yeah, here we go. The emanation of the son of Buddha. Okay. Next up, this is, we'll finish up this paragraph here. Reader, please.
Martha, can you read that for us, please? Whoops, I don't see her anymore, so she can't. And Veronica, can you read that for us? You are self-muted. There you go. Yes, thank you.
They are, as Mr. Rhys Davids correctly states, the glorious counterparts of the mystic world, freeing from the debasing conditions of this material life, of every earthly mortal Buddha, the liberated Manushi Buddha appointed to govern the earth in this round. They are the Buddhas of the contemplation. They are all Anupadaka, parentless, i.e. self-born of divine essence. The exoteric teachings which say that every Dhyani Buddha has the faculty of creating from himself an equally celestial son, a Dhyani Bodhisattva, who after the decrees of the Manushi, human Buddha, has to carry out the work of the later, rests on the fact that owing to the highest initiation performed by one overshadowed by the spirit of Buddha, who is credited by the Orientalists with having created the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, a candidate becomes virtually a bodhisattva, created such by the higher initiator.
Okay. Any thoughts about this? Questions? Interestingly, the author and Pali language expert Rhys Davids was a magistrate in Ceylon, or Gale, where later Colonel Olcott lectured and practiced his healing arts, as described in old diary leaves. So, the Manushi Buddhas appointed to govern the earth in this round would be extensions of the synthesizing Dhyani Buddha of that round. Here's a sculpture of the Dhyani Buddha Amitabha with 8 Manushi Buddhas depicted at the bottom, showing again that the ones below come from, or extensions of the consciousness of the one above.
Francis?
Yeah.
Lynn says, it is interesting that the Dalai Lama is considered to be an incarnation, and I'm going to butcher this, sorry, Avalokiteshvara.
Avalokiteshvara, is that who you're
Yeah.
going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, it would be, it would be thrice removed. Literally that's true. If we go back to our chart here, where is it? Right, the Avalokiteshvara, where is it? There we go. So Avalokiteshvara is the synthesizing logos. And so if you, Dalai Lama would be, in my opinion, akin to, a great incarnatable being, such as Tsongkhapa was. Well, there's a direct line from top to bottom here, right? Passing through these, intermediate stages of Buddhahood. And so in that sense, yes. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Okay, where in the heck were we? Yeah, we did that and that. So we've talked about this idea of anupadaka earlier. Manushi Buddhis are free from the cycle of incarnation and thus, quote, parentless, because they aren't born of parents in an incarnation. They manifest in accordance with the wishes of the Dhyani Buddha who send them forth. Next, this phrase, the exoteric teaching, which says that every Dhyani Buddha has the faculty of creating from himself an equally celestial son, a Dhyani Bodhisattva, is another example of a downward or outward extension. But the exoteric part of this belief, we're here told, is that through initiation, that same father-son relationship that exists between a Dhyani Buddha and a Dhyani Bodhisattva can be created through initiation. But Theosophy teaches us that though the relationship between a high initiator and a candidate may open the eyes of the latter to higher awareness, even briefly the awareness of the initiator, that candidate is still not a self-born son of said initiator. So there's a bit of exoteric understanding creeping in here. Any thoughts or questions about this? Very complicated business, right? But it's not important that you know every phase of all 9 levels, but to realize that each becomes, in a sense, a vehicle for the one above it, or in some cases there's one skipped, right? And that these are for particular purposes. For instance, in a round chain, you have globes. And so there's going to be the next lower on the list that will oversee that globe. And then within that globe are 7 root races. And there's going to be, the next down from that list will overshadow that type of thing, right? And instead of just being totally bewildered by all these terms, you get some understanding from it. Okay, let's see how we're doing. That's it, folks. We'll stop here, pick up with the commentary for the end of this verse next time, and which is a lengthy commentary. That's a good place to stop. Thanks for coming today. I know we're approaching Christmas, so I appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this. And we have a few announcements. One is that we're going to be switching over at our next webinar, which will be on the secret teachings of all ages. We'll be switching over from GoToWebinar to Zoom webinar. And this will require that you sign up again. It won't just be automatic. So you will be sent a link for that sign up, but you will have to make that effort to do so. And that will then, after that, you will then get notifications from Zoom, just like you now get them from GoToWebinar. Am I on track, BL, with what I've said so far?
Yes. I have the new Zoom link, and I will put it in the announcement that I send out later today that says I've posted this to Makara. That will have the new registration link, and that should be good for all of 2021.
Yeah, good.
Those of you who attend the STOA also, you should have seen that was the same case with that. Our next STOA is the 3rd of January, and that
That'll be
is
the
the new
first
link.
Zoom. Yeah.
Right. That'll be our
That'll be the
first
first Zoom.
And you guys are
Right.
going to have to bear with us as we have a learning curve on a new platform here, but
Yeah, it's like, we were talking about humanities from different planets, right? The GoToWebinar and Zoom webinar were created by different planetary humanities. They are just something at their root is a fundamentally different way of seeing things. But we'll work through it and figure it out. It shouldn't, most of it's going to be under the hood, and so you won't really notice that much of a difference. But there are a few things that we'll have to address, and we'll do a little short 2 or 3 minute tutorial on how, as an attendee, you want to relate to this platform. Okay. So
thank you,
otherwise,
everybody. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Joe and Michael.
okay. So dates.
And Merry Christmas. Oh, yeah. The next Secret Teachings of All Ages is 3 January, and the next Secret Doctrine is 17 January. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy
Yeah.
Holidays in whatever way you celebrate them.
Yes, and stay safe out there. Wear your hazmat suit when you leave the house. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.